All right, guys, welcome to this episode. This is Jim Huntsman, the host of the Western Huntsman podcast, and I figured what I'd do before I put this episode out is record a quick disclaimer. First and foremost, I don't endorse political candidates, not on this show and really not anywhere. Second, if you are or know someone running for public office, whether it's state, local, federal, whatever, they're more than welcome to come on my show and have a long, free-form conversation like the one Ammon and I had. That is just something I'm willing to do. So I think this stuff is important, and it's good for. I think this is a good way for people to get to know candidates. So during these political seasons, that window is open, and you are free to email me at jim@thewesternhuntsman.com, and I will set that up. Lastly, in this particular episode, I'm in kind of a catch-22 situation. Many of you know where I stand on public lands, and the management that we currently have is one that I am a huge fan of. So the catch-22 kind of comes as this. Folks that are staunch, faithful followers of Ammon Bundy and his candidacy for Idaho governor are probably going to be upset with me for challenging Ammon on some of these topics. Folks that are advocates for our current public land management system, like I am, might be mad at me for not challenging Ammon hard enough. The point with this conversation was not to create contention or argue or, have some serious knockdown debate over public land management. It was really to have a robust conversation about his side of it and my side of it and kind of see where, the conversation could take us. Again, the point is to provide a free-form, long conversation so people can get to know candidates. And Ammon is no exception to this. There were times I was called out for being wrong. And I held my tongue where I knew I wasn't wrong in a particular, a couple of them. And that is for a reason. I want these conversations to be respectful. And so I held my tongue. And honestly, I imagine Ammon did the same thing. He was respectful and I was respectful. We had a great conversation. Honestly, I didn't know much about Ammon Bundy until I had him on the show. And he's somebody I'd probably get back on again. I felt like we both where we totally disagree on the public land management systems, whether they're in place or something that somebody may be looking to change. We totally disagree on it. It doesn't matter. That's the point of having these conversations. And I felt like it was, even with those disagreements, very respectful, and I appreciate it. So again, anybody else that wants to come on and talk about their candidacy, they're more than welcome. So with that, guys, let's get to it with Ammon Bundy, candidate for Idaho governor. There exists a threat from anti-hunting groups to politicians trying to give our land away, and we won't stand for it. Those vast western landscapes provide the space for our wildlife to thrive and a place for hunters and anglers to fuel the fire that sparks their soul. In this show, we share our love of hunting, fishing, and conservation. Here, we provide the foundation to meet these threats through passion and the grit of the American outdoorsman. Welcome to the Western Huntsman Podcast. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this episode of the Western Huntsman Podcast. This is Jim Huntsman, your host, and I'm coming at you from the Broken Tine studio right here in Clark Fork, Idaho. Sunny September, Clark Fork, Idaho, that is. Awful warm this time of year. The elk are not talking yet, but I have a feeling that's going to change. So, a heck of an episode for you guys this week. I have gubernatorial candidate Ammon Bundy on the show, and we're gonna talk a little bit about his background, some of his philosophy, what he's running on, and we're gonna just have a great conversation. Ammon, appreciate you being here, my friend.
Absolutely. Look forward to it.
Where are you at right now? You live in southern Idaho? I don't even know where you live.
I live in Emmett, Idaho. That's about 45 minutes north of Boise, not too far from the Oregon border.
Oh, okay.
Sitting on my front porch.
Sitting on the front porch. Is it hot down there?
There's a little breeze and it's making it cool. They're not, it's making it pretty nice outside. Actually, it's really nice.
Yeah, that's good. It's been unusually hot up here. I've been out chasing elk for the last week or so, and like they're not talking, they're not moving. I mean, I've even sat over water, all sorts of stuff, and it's just, man, nothing's really happening yet. So I'm hoping this weather changes soon.
It
Um,
will. I can feel it. It's changing.
you can feel it at night, right? That's where I'm
Oh
feeling it.
yeah,
It's
yeah. It's changing.
yeah. So Ammon, you have a background that I think that a lot of listeners are going to be fairly familiar with. You've been in the news. You've got a big social media presence. You've made some waves for sure. Can you give us like your the bird's eye view of your background, how you grew up, and kind of bring us up to date? Does that make sense?
Sure. If I don't give you what you want, then just let me know, and I'll keep emphasizing or keep giving the details. I
Okay.
I grew up. I'm 47. I just turned 47 on September 1st, and I grew up in southern Nevada on a ranch there. It's just south of Mesquite, Nevada, and northeast of Lake Mead.
Okay.
And so my family went into that area and began running cattle and farming in that area in 1877. So Nevada was only a state for been an only state for 11 years, I think, 11, 12 years. Anyway,
Mm-hmm.
13 years. And my that's what my family's been doing. I grew up in the same home that my father grew up in, which my grandfather grew up in. A little 1,200 square foot home, no AC. They finally put AC in it just a couple of years ago. So I have a whole bunch of brothers and sisters, and grew up. That's the way I grew up, doing a lot of work on the ranch. Spent a ton of time out, in the hills. Did a lot of, hunting and a lot of just spending a ton of time outside.
Okay. So you grew up down just south of Mesquite, Nevada. Did I hear that right?
Correct, Mesquite, Nevada. Um, I grew up on a ranch south of there,
Uh-huh.
and I did go to public school. Spent a lot of time on the school bus every day, but in the summers and we spent all our time out on the range and just did a lot of work there on the farm and spent a lot of time, hunting and spending a lot of time outside and just that's the way I grew up.
Kind of a typical Western upbringing, rural Western upbringing, really. Um,
Yeah,
that's interesting because I had my family had some property. If you're familiar with Mesquite, Nevada, we if you cross over onto the Arizona side, what is that little town called? Beaver Dam? I
there's a
think.
beaver dam. Yep, beaver
Yeah.
dam, and next to Littlefield.
Yep, that whole area. So we'd go down there when I was kids and quail hunt. We'd I actually shot a wild boar on the Virgin River right outside of Mesquite, Nevada years ago. So
Yeah, there was a exotic like wildlife area there, kind of like a zoo almost, and a flood came through there and wiped out the lower fields and lower fences.
oh wow.
And these boars, they were domesticated, but they were like very from a different country, and they got out on that river and they started multiplying. And at one time, we had a ton of wild boars out there, and that's probably what you were hunting.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
was, and they ended up, hunting them all down, and it took 20, 30 years, and they hunted them all down. We did that, at least my brother did that. I didn't get into it much, but so they actually people would ask us to guide them on these boar hunts. My two older brothers would guide, and they'd get into that brush, and they'd shoot them with uh, 45 pistols or
Mm-hmm.
big pistols, and because it was so
Yeah.
thick, the brush.
Yeah, it's super thick. I I lucked out. I actually ended up shooting mine, and this is back in 1999. I shot mine with a replica Springfield 42 musket, smoothbore musket it's a Civil War replica musket. I've even got the
That's cool.
bayonet for it still.
That's cool.
And
That's really
so
cool.
had him mounted. It was a big old bore. I had him mounted, and I call him Hillary. So my wife hates it though. She's always trying to knock it off the wall with the vacuum.
Oh, that's awesome. That's awesome.
So why run for governor, man? That's got to be because I think about that and I think about it from a sense of I have no interest in that because of the I mean you just take kind of a beating and the politics involved in it obviously because it is politics. What kind of brought you to this point where you're like, you know what, I'm going to run for governor of Idaho, and what if you win? What are like the three main objectives you're trying to achieve as governor?
Yeah, well, so I really haven't had any desire at all to be political in the sense of running for office. But my family got thrown into the political limelight, if you will, over what happened in 2014.
Mm-hmm.
And it just pushed us into, continually responding, continually being engaged, continually having to defend ourselves. And so I don't know, this increase in like kind of scrutiny and even hatred and so forth that you see in politics. I've been dealing with that for almost a decade now. So
Yeah.
it's not like this campaign has changed that. In fact, in some ways, it's actually become even easier because I'm actually running for office. So, but it never was my desire. I see Idaho changing into something that I don't want it to change into. I see a need to preserve our conservative identity here, and I also see an opportunity where people are recognizing that if we don't act now, we're going to end up like in Oregon or Washington. Um, or the list goes on and on. California, Nevada, where I came from, New Mexico, Colorado recently. We're going to end up like that. And I had a name and the time and the resources to run, and it has been crazy because we've been going at this for a year and a half now. But we've made really good waves, and we believe we have a really strong chance of winning here in Idaho.
What do you feel like? Because there's some things I agree with what you said there. When we're talking about like the state is changing, Idaho is there's some changes that are happening that can be disturbing to think about. It's not like what's going to happen tomorrow. It's what's it going to be like in 10 years. You know what I mean? What do you see as a way as a governor you can make an impact on that? Like what's the plan on that side of it? Because I'm with you on that part. I don't want to be Oregon and I don't want to be California, especially when we're talking along the lines of like hunting rights, anti-hunting legislative actions, commissions taken over by legislators, things like that. That's what
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to have happen here in Idaho. What do you feel like
Yeah.
you can do impact wise on that front?
Well, so yeah, I appreciate that, and I'll try to kind of direct it to your interest in hunting and outdoors, and so we have right now, and we've been under attack for a long time. The entire issues that my family had in Nevada when it come to the federal government trying to destroy my father's ranch, it was all an extreme environmentalist movement, where they're trying to take this, the land and keep people from using it. They're trying to protect the wildlife, the species, as they would put it, and make it so that man can't, harvest it and use it and benefit from it and enjoy it. They I'm giving you this, outlook, or at least I'm saying these things to try to, you know, go really to all the way to the bottom, the foundation of what is happening and why it's so dangerous. because this uh, extreme environmentalists, these extreme environmentalists, it's a theology to them, it's a religion to them, and they believe that man is an invasive species, that he's just another equal species among all the other species, and that it is their duty to stop us from, you know, harming or hurting or being adversarial to the other species.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I mean, and that is a real thing. And so they go out and try to stop us from using the land and the resources. Uh, and it becomes a real big problem, especially when they get into government. And so I say that because it's contrary to the Judeo Christian belief, which is that God created the earth, He placed man and woman on the earth, and He gave us dominion over the earth, told us to use it and to benefit from it. And we're supposed to be responsible with it, but it is ours here to use, to benefit from, and to enjoy.
Sure.
Well, their theology is completely different from that. And our culture has been built upon the Judeo Christian belief that the earth is for mankind to use, take care of, and benefit from.
Mm-hmm.
And so, when we go hunt and we harvest the animals, when we go elk hunting, we're not only benefiting the elk and managing the herds and all of that, but we're using them according to what I believe is God's intent. But they don't believe that. They believe that we're just another species equal to all the other species, and that we become intellectually advanced. And therefore, it is their job to balance the species. And that's a real common term that they use, balance the species. And how do they do that? Well, they have to create a disadvantage for mankind, stop them from using the land, using the earth, harvesting the animals, and what they would say, put the nature of balance of nature back, or nature back in its balance.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, if we don't understand like how much it really means to them that this is a religion, we're already behind the eight ball here, thinking that, oh, this is just a political thing that we can win by getting good legislation or something.
Yeah, that kind of stuff alarms me because there's like this dichotomy with it. When you're talking about, and I call them hostile vegans, and I call them, these anti-hunting folks that are just real vitriolic about their belief in allowing nature to balance itself. What they don't realize is, in no time in human history has nature really balanced itself. When it has been left unchecked by man, that is
That's
when
correct.
things actually get out of balance. And so we have created this system culturally in the United States of America where hunting is ingrained in our culture, especially in Idaho. The statistic in Idaho is somewhere like 36% of the population hunts and fishes, or bought
Yeah.
a hunting and fishing license. That's a staggering number when you compare that to the national average of less than 5% of the population. So in Idaho, this is even
Hmm.
compounded more. And
Yes.
what has happened because of that, it is the result has been that it is hunters that have balanced the wildlife to the point in which they're thriving now. It is hunters that have brought back species from the brink of extinction. It is not PETA that has achieved this, and I've said this on the show multiple times. So listeners, bear with me, but I think this is an important point. It is not the Humane Society of the United States and these activists and these hostile vegans that try to get involved, and PETA, that make any real tangible change to our wildlife. And these species thrive in spite of them, not because of them. Would you agree with that?
I absolutely 100% agree. If let me, if I can, I'll give you an example of this
Yeah.
in the ranching, uh, you know, uh, industry, if you will. I don't know if that's the best word to use, but so before Wild Horse Annie got involved, the horses in the states, in the Western United States, the wild horses, because the horses were brought over here by man. They're not naturally were here.
Sure.
But anyhow, the way that they were managed, and it's exactly what you're saying. The same thing uh, happened with the wild horses. Well, the ranchers used to uh, manage and cull the wild horses. So, they were running cattle on a certain area, and they also had a small horse herd, and they made sure that the horse herd, had new blood in it. They made sure it didn't get too big, uh, and they used those horses for ranching purposes, and they would sell and trade and do all that. And these horses were some of the best bloodlines that you could get in the western United States because the ranchers maintained them that way.
Mm-hmm.
Well, then the federal government came in under the Wild Horse Annie and the Wild Horse Act. They came in and they made it illegal to manage and to harvest and to cull the wild horses. So what happened?
They're
Now they've
running
turned.
amok. They're destroying many parts of the West.
That's right. And they're inbred and they get tons of diseases and they get so populated that they'll start to kill themselves and they destroy massive amounts of land in the Western United States because their hooves are not split hooves. And the way they eat, they actually pull the roots out of the ground. And it's become a complete disaster because the federal government took man out of the equation. And it's exactly what you're saying. The same exact thing has happened with the wildlife. Well, it hasn't happened, but it will happen if they let it happen. If they take man out of the equation, that's what will happen with wildlife.
Well, in one way, I think we could agree on this issue because, like, one way you could really relate that to like modern day and or things that are close to home to us in the northern Rocky tri-state region. Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. We've got this grizzly bear population that is unmanaged and unchecked. And when I guess one way to look at that, and I guess where I'm going with that is, people sometimes misinterpret what I mean by that. I don't hate grizzly bears, and I think that grizzly bears belong on the landscape. What I hate is an unchecked management system on any kind of apex predator. So when you look at, statistically speaking, like the state of Alaska, where they can manage grizzly bears through hunting, has a much smaller per capita human interaction or encounter or attack, however you want to describe it, versus the northern Rocky Mountain tri-state region. Like per capita, we have more bear attacks from grizzly bears here in the tri-state region, and that is because these bears have no management. And so what happens is these bears end up getting killed by the fish and game agencies because they wander into town. In fact, there's a news story yesterday here in Idaho. There was a bear wandering right outside the town of Bonners Ferry, Idaho, which is about an hour north of me. And what's going to happen to that bear? He's going to get into trouble and he's going to get killed. Versus if we had a small percentage of hunting tags available in the state of Idaho, where we don't allow these federal judges to get involved and knock that down, allow us to manage the wildlife, right? Those bears would get this sense that there is reason to fear humans like they do in Alaska. And it's also the same thing, like if you look at New Jersey black bear attacks, where there's not a lot of hunting privilege up there for hunting bears, versus here. We have a very similar per capita population of black bears between Idaho and New Jersey, yet there's a lot more attacks in New Jersey because they don't have any fear of humans and there's a lot more interaction. So I kind of took us down a tangent there. Let me back us up here because I think there's, we could spend the whole podcast talking just about wildlife management. But I'd like to get your, outside of that kind of stuff, what's your vision for Idaho? Do you have like a basic philosophical vision for the state of Idaho and how that would relate to, the basic Idahoan that's out there every day working to get a paycheck? What do you see as problematic and what would you hope to solve?
Well, I see several things that are problematic. One is I think we definitely need to eliminate our current property tax system and protect private property to make sure that our homes and our lands and those things that are private are protected. And I'm proposing we get rid of our current property tax system, which allows the state to, lien and control through a tax system, and we replace it with a consumption tax based upon the point of sale, much like we purchase everything else. So that's a concern.
So,
Um,
on that note, Eamon, what do you mean? Like when? So the only tax you would pay would be like when you buy the property, kind of thing, instead of like an annual property tax.
Correct. So
Okay.
you just like everything else we buy, we don't pay taxes forever on our cars or on our, on our computers or on our other equipment. We don't pay taxes forever on it. We pay a tax up front, a consumption tax up front, and then it's ours. Now, people might say, well, does that mean that the state is going to lose money? And it doesn't, because the average home sells 3 to 5 times. Average property sells 3 to 5 times in a 30-year period. And
Hmm.
so, if you set that consumption tax at, let's say, 5%, then that more than compensates what the local governments are getting in property tax. But the difference is you don't have to keep paying taxes every year, and the state can't lien your property.
Are there any other states that do it that way?
There are states that do it that way and do the our current property tax system as well, but none that do just consumption.
I think.
Does that makes it.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was just saying that makes sense what I said.
Yeah, no,
So
that makes sense. I think I'm always trying to play devil's advocate a little bit here and there.
yeah,
What
I
what
like
would
that.
what would pop into my mind when you describe it? Because I've never heard it described like that. But you're talking to a dude that doesn't get super involved in the deep dark spaces of politics very often. Um, what pops into my head is the current home prices in Idaho due to the recent influx of just major new residents we've been seeing over the last few years. Wouldn't that add to the purchase price substantially when somebody's looking to like make an offer on a home or something?
Yeah, they already increase, property tax according to the value of the home anyway. So
Yeah, yeah, we all saw
you either
that.
pay it at the time. Yeah, you either pay it at the time of purchase, or you're going to pay it, within the next few years after that. Um, so, I mean, the answer is yes, it does, but you're going to pay that anyway. And the one thing about the way that it's structured now is you keep paying that for decades. And unless there's some way to force it to push it down and get them to assess it lower, um, then you keep paying that. And I don't like to purchase something and then have to pay and pay it, pay the bank or
Pay it
whatever,
again, yeah.
purchase it, play and clear, and then I just have to keep paying every year. It is not a very good system, and what we're seeing is we're mostly seeing the elderly that's really affected, and they're being driven out of their homes after 30, 40, 50 years being in their homes. They can't afford their own homes,
Yeah.
and they're losing it to the state, or they're having to sell it when they don't want to sell it.
No, that's happened. That is all too common, and there is a sense. Again, I've never thought of this on this deeply before, but there is a sense that like for what my wife and I did, we sold our last house and took the equity and bought bare land, right? And so we own it
Right.
outright. We paid the lion's share of this, but there is this sense where I feel like we don't fully own it because if we don't pay the taxes, they can take it from us, even though we've already paid taxes on it the first year. And so
Yeah,
that,
it's not. Yeah, exactly. It's
you
not just
know,
a sense. That's the reality.
yeah. No, it is a reality. And, but what the sense was like, I can say, yeah, I own this land outright, but then there's like this clause that is like, a kicker there that is like, well, as long as I pay the taxes, I own it outright, right? And then that
Right.
resets itself every year. So, okay, no,
Well, and
that's cool. See that?
as long as you can afford to pay the taxes too. And the problem is once you get on a fixed income, retired or whatever, and you can't afford it anymore, then you have to give up your home that you don't want to give up, but you just simply can't afford it because the property tax has increased and it's too much for you to front.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never thought of that topic before. So I mean, I guess logically that would make some sense. Because I do get tired of seeing people lose their homes or choose between paying taxes versus buying groceries, especially the elderly when they've lived there for 30, 40, 50 years. The home's been paid off for decades, but they could still lose it. I do find a level there is a lot of injustice in that.
Yep.
So,
Yeah, there is, and it's contrary to the American dream, and it's
mhm,
actually when the state can take your property just simply because you can't pay them. Yeah, there's just something, yeah, fundamentally wrong about that.
sure. See, this is why I have people like you on the show, man. I learn things like I would have never thought that into that kind of level. So I'm curious, Ammon. There's been like some controversial things in your background with being in the news and some headlines and stuff. How do you feel like you've been misinterpreted, or if there's been some like misconstruing of what your either beliefs or stances have been? Does that make sense how I asked that?
Yeah. So I I have had many people tell me after they've met me and talked to me like that you're 180-degree different than what the media has portrayed you as, and I say I am. And then they start asking and trying to figure out why would the media say and do those things, and because what I am proposing as policy and as my principles and so forth is so contrary to theirs, to the mainstream media, to kind of the, if you will, the establishment, those in power. It's so contrary to theirs that they try to demonize me in the media.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been something that I've dealt with for many years now. And so, Google my name. You'll have fun with that. I have fun with it. I say, who is this guy?
Well, I
I
did.
always, I always, I always tease my kids. I go, is this your dad? And they're like, well, I don't know. That's your picture, and is your dad a militant anti-government, you know? And I have fun with that. Is he a criminal?
Yeah,
Is your dad a criminal? Just for fun. And so, I mean, that's a journey people have to go on if they want to and find out the truth.
sure, sure. I mean, I don't think anybody that listens to this show would be super surprised to learn that the media misrepresented either you or your beliefs or facts of what has happened. And I'll be honest with you, I'm somewhat ignorant to a lot of that. I've mentioned I was going to get you on the show, and I feel like there's people that know a lot more about you and your background than I do. Um, but I mean, it'd be hard to live in the Western U.S. and not, never heard the name Ammon Bundy, right? And so I'm glad you clarified that because I believe that the media, especially the national media, we all know they have an agenda, and so they're
Yeah.
gonna spin things the way they want them.
Yeah.
And
Exactly.
obviously, as I told you before we set all this up, this show as a platform, we don't endorse candidates one way or the other. The idea with you coming on the show is what I was describing to you earlier. Um, Candidates running for whether it's a state legislator or congressman or senator or in your case governor, you guys have very few opportunities to have long form discussions that can get out to massive amounts of people. And
Right.
so, and this opportunity is available for any Idaho based somebody running for office in the state of Idaho, in fact, anywhere out west, this opportunity is available. If you're anything like me, you're always looking for ways to improve your elk hunting skills for September. And one of my favorite ways is the Elk Collective. It's an absolute game changer in self-education. This virtual elk hunting course has over 150 videos that cover everything from elk calling, strategy, tips, setup, gear, much, much more. There's a bunch of people involved. Some of the best elk hunters in the woods are involved with the Elk Collective, and they've come together to put together this virtual course to help you notch more tags in September. So check it out at theelkcollective.com and use promo code, all one word, The Western Huntsman, for $20 off the entire course. That makes the course only $69. It's a great deal, and I promise if you go through this course, you will go into the elk woods with a lot more confidence and a much better chance at notching a tag on the mighty Whopping. Hoffman Boots is the boot choice of the Western Huntsman podcast, and it has been for a very long time. I love my Hoffman in the Explorers, in the 6-inch or the 8-inch. They have all sorts of options for you to check out. Hoffman Boots is my go-to boot because I am a firm believer that when it comes to gear, the one piece of gear you don't want to skip on is boots. Get really good boots, and if you choose to do some Hoffman boots, you're going to find out why I highly recommend these hunting boots. Made by a multi-generational family of shoemakers, these boots are made right here in North Idaho, and I've got an excellent deal for you if you choose to go with Hoffman boots. Use promo code AllCapsLockHuntsman10 for 10% off. Get you some of these boots and find out why I love them. They're totally waterproof. They're going to give you great traction on the mountain. They're super comfortable. There's very little break-in period. Can't recommend Hoffman boots enough. Check it out, guys. Next on the list is Scree Gear, high-octane hunting attire without breaking the bank. You want to go into the field with good camo, right? You want camo that works, that'll keep you dry, that'll keep you comfortable. You want layering systems, the merino wool, the rain gear, all the things that make hunting a little bit easier and allows you to stay in the field a lot longer. The problem with most of it is it's super expensive. Not with Scree Gear. Scree Gear will give you all the high-end technical gear that you want without having to take out a second mortgage, and that's why I like it. And to make it even better, got a promo code, The Western Huntsman, all one word, and that will give you 15% off and free shipping. It's a heck of a deal, guys. I recommend checking out like their bundle packages. They have like the elk bundle or the whitetail bundle or the turkey bundle. All those bundles come with multiple pieces of gear, and you won't regret getting this gear. It's great stuff. Check out Scree at screegear.com. Oh, and you want to call in an elk? Use Phelps Game Calls. I've been using Phelps Game Calls since just about the beginning of Phelps Game Calls. It's a great company story, too. This company started in a little garage and is now one of the premier call companies on within the industry. I mean, you can't go wrong with Phelps Game Calls, whether it's turkey calls, predator calls, waterfowl, or especially I think the bread and butter is the elk calls. And I use the Maverick, I use the Pink, I use the Gray Amp. Check out the AMP series. If you're new to calling, I recommend getting a couple of different ones and trying them out. Find out which one works best for you. But I promise you I'm not steering you wrong when it comes to Phelps Game Calls. It's a great company full of great people that make excellent products that actually work. And the proof is in the pudding. Call in a lot of elk, and you will too if you trust me by going to PhelpsGameCalls.com. I got a promo code for you, right? Huntsman10 for 10% off your Phelps Game Calls, and check them out. Phelps Game Calls. Get them close. Two last items. Check out the Reveal cell cams from Tacticam, whether it is for hunting or security. These are excellent cell cams that I have all over my property. To include, I put them on some job sites for some security, so people I know if they're stealing materials or whatever, I'm going to catch them. And another little promo code I like to throw out there is for Batum907 for anybody that is hunting bears, spring or fall, and you are allowed to bait. Don't forget to go to Batum907.com. Since made in Alaska, use promo code Huntsman10 for 10% off. The stuff works, and it works well. Let's get back to the show. Here we go. I had a really good point as to where I was going with this, Ammon, and now I kind of lost track. But I do want to. What would you say? What would you say really separates you in terms of like a differentiator between you and your opponents?
I think that the proper use of government probably really separates me the most. Um,
What do you mean by
I,
that?
I, well, I believe I guess more of a constitutionalist. I'm more of a original intent. When you go and read like documents like the Declaration of Independence, I think it lays it out very clearly. It says, that man was created by God, he was created equal, and he was given certain rights. Among those are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then it goes on and say that to secure these rights, governments was instituted among men
Hmm.
and by men. And so that lays it out that who we are, and it lays it out that we have these rights, and that man instituted government to secure the rights that God gave us.
Hmm.
And so the purpose of and the reason they did that is to secure those rights. So the purpose of government is to secure rights. It's not to give somebody welfare. It's not to give a big corporation an advantage over another corporation. It's not to get. It's not so that we can run to them when when we can't pay our own bills. That's not what government is for. Government is for uh, the purpose of securing the rights equal among all of us so that we can go out and work and be able to put money in our pocket and keep it so that we can have homes and property and know that somebody else that's just more powerful than us won't just take it, um, so that we have a place to go. And when we have a problem that where something is off, that we can go to the courts and try to work them out civilly. That's what government is for, to secure those rights.
Hmm.
But what we have seen happen, especially in recent days, is government's being used to give uh, their buddies an advantage over the other people, over the other businesses, or to push a certain ideology, and to use the government to force that, or to redistribute wealth that's created by people, and then the government takes it and then distributes it to other people that they think should have it. And I completely disagree with that. And that sets me apart from those who I am running against.
So your philosophy is a little bit less or more anti-establishment. It's a tongue twister, apparently. Anti-establishment more so than like anti-government, because that's how you're portrayed often, is anti-government or whatever. But it's more like an anti-establishment. That you kind of want to shake up the political system of the good old boy club that gives each other handouts and gets votes by buying them through institutions such as welfare. Would that be accurate?
Yeah, I think that's actually well said. In fact, I might steal that from you, that I'm anti-establishment, not anti-government, because I think
Hey,
that's absolutely correct.
you should make that into a T-shirt, and I get 10% of the proceeds.
Just send me your bank account.
We're making wait a minute, Am. I don't give any politicians my bank account, all right?
Well, I'm not. I'm just running for politics. I'm not one
Yeah,
yet, but I have to be
you're not
elected.
officially there yet. I get it. I
That's
get
right, right.
it.
So
No,
you can
that's
trust me for a couple more months, right?
I that actually that's a great kind of segue into one of the things. Again, this is why I like having somebody in your position on the show, because this allows us to really get an idea of who you are, what your personality is in a long form conversation, because we're
Sure,
just two Idahoans having a conversation.
that's right.
This does segue into one of the things I've heard nothing from you that makes me think that you wouldn't make a good governor, but I've read something on your website where I have some apprehension, and
Okay.
I think you and I should just have a debate about it. And a discussion to see kind of I want to see where you stand philosophically and kind of where it comes from, and see if we can come to like a consensus, if that makes sense. Does that sound fair?
Absolutely. Yeah, I sure hope so.
Public land. Public land is when I say public land, I mean federally managed public land, not state-owned
Okay.
land,
Right.
because there's way different outcomes of who owns what, right? And I,
Right.
I know that this has been a big topic for you in the past, and I kind of I think I have a basic understanding of what you believe about it. And would you mind if I described how I feel about it, and then we can kind of go from there?
Yeah. Yeah, I want to know, as long as you don't assume that you think you know what I believe, because I want that to be fresh, but
Yeah, yeah,
yeah, I
yeah.
want to hear what you think.
No, that's totally fair because I want to hear. You're the one that has that belief, so I don't know what you believe, and so we'll hear it from both sides. I mean, my philosophy is super simple. When we're looking at all the issues out there, whether we're facing them as a country or a state or a county or a municipality, it doesn't matter. We're dealing with things like inflation. We've got corruption on local and federal levels. We've got a border crisis. We've got gas prices absolutely destroying people. We've got this liberal wokeness coming into our culture and just eating away at the foundational philosophies of what it means to be an American. We've got energy issues, infrastructure, rising housing costs, or I'm sorry, costs, regulatory absolute, well, I'm trying to watch my mouth. I'm going to use clean language. Business regulations out of hand. We've got pandemics, failing education, criminal justice imbalances, all these things. Fentanyl coming across our borders, drug problems. The I guess I'm saying all this is the one thing that I believe from my standpoint that the federal government actually does a good job at, and you won't hear me say this very often, is they do a good job at managing our public land. When I say public land, I'm specifically speaking about the United States Forest Service mostly, and because that's what I spend a lot of time on. And I'm a firm believer in our public land system, and I'm a firm believer that everybody has the right and the freedom to enjoy these lands because they're your lands, they're my lands, they're everybody's lands, and it's a big part of my show. How how do you feel about them? What is your philosophy or your take on federal management on public land systems?
Well, let's just talk about I guess we could talk about the management, because on a constitutional basis, there is no authority whatsoever for the federal government to be controlling mass amounts of land inside a state. But let's just set that aside and let's talk about what really is happening. Um, uh, Again, these federal land agencies, including the Forest Service, Bureau of Land Management, U.S. Park Service, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, they are now becoming completely infiltrated with these extreme environmentalists and their agenda. And I saw this. No one can dispute this. They destroyed the entire ranching industry in Nevada, in the area that I grew up in. And they did it by getting control of the Bureau of Land Management. So they got in there, they got in control of the ranks, and then they began using the federal government to destroy mining, destroy ranching, destroy logging, and that's happening here in Idaho too. So we talk about the management. Uh, what's happening to our forests right now? They're becoming densely thick, or they start to burn. There's a bumper sticker that says log it, graze it, or watch it burn.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure you've run across um, what it looks like after a densely forest uh, area has burnt, and how devastating it is to the area, how devastating it is to the wildlife. And that's because they are implementing and are pushing and are continuing to implement this more and more across the Western United States is they're implementing a no use policy. And when you and I have a dispute with that, saying, look, we don't think that you should stop the use of hunting in this area, or stop the use of grazing or logging in this area. We don't have much of a voice because it's become a federal issue, right? We can make a complaint, we can participate in meetings, and they can decide whether they want to listen to us or not. We don't have a voice. And it's not the way that it was supposed to be. It was supposed to be the local people of that area that are the ones that get to make the decisions according to the land and the area and that jurisdiction. So, on its face, that's a little bit of my response. Who's the primary closer of roads? The federal government. Who's the primary closer of areas for hunting? The federal government. Who's stopping ranching, mining, logging, and all of that in these areas? The federal government.
I think that one thing I would push back on with well, actually, before I say that, like, if are you saying that if we were to free these bureaucracies, I'm having a hard time pronouncing words that are usually pretty easy for me. If we were to free these bureaucracies from environmentalists, would federal management of public lands be something that you could get on board with, or is that something that because you'd mentioned something constitutionally, which I would push back on that as well, and that's that's part of why we have these discussions, so we can talk about this stuff. But if we were able to strip the environmentalists out of any kind of control positions within these bureaucracies, is federal management something that you would be in support of or against still?
Well, one is you can't separate the two. You can't.
I know. I'm talking totally theoretically. I am well aware. Because I agree. I agree that the extremist environmentalists are decaying these agencies, and they're creating more problems than they're solving. And I don't even think that they have the what one could consider. They're not looking to have a positive impact at this point. It's beyond that. It's turned into this extremist thing where it's almost like they know they're being detrimental and they don't care. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so
they do. That's exactly correct. They know they are. That's because their idea of what should be used, what the land and resources should be used for, is completely contrary to your and I's ideas.
So I guess, I mean, touching on the constitutionality of it, the only thing I would say to that is I feel like the precedent has been set since the 1800s on who has the authority to determine what a law means, and that's the Supreme Court, and that's through the Constitution. So it's constitutionally viable to have federal management over these public lands, in my opinion. The other side to that is, what is your solution? What is your idea? Because we do have these environmentalists taking over some of these agencies, and it is creating problems. I don't disagree with you on that. But how would you have it be were it not? I mean, obviously, public lands is not something the governor is usually going to dip his toes in and deal with anyways. But if you were like King, let's say, and you could change the public land system, what would be ideal in your mind?
Okay, so those are two really big questions.
They are.
I'd like to tackle them one at a time.
Okay.
The first one, you talked about the constitutionality of federal land control. Mm-hmm. And I can, hear and appreciate your position, but I can tell you that it's not correct. Legally, it's not correct.
How so?
Because you are, under the assumption that the federal land control has gone to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court has ruled that is the fact. That has not been ruled upon.
Okay.
And so that, let's get that right out front. What has been ruled upon, and where the federal government wants people to believe that they have won, is what in Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, it says that all territories and other properties basically are that Congress has authority to control all territories and other properties of the United States. That's pretty close to how it's said. I don't have the Constitution in front of me, but
I
and so
I can actually, let's see.
yeah,
The
Article
Congress,
432.
Clause 2, Property Clause, the Congress shall have power to dispose of and make all needful rules and regulations respecting the territory or other property belonging to the United States.
That's correct. So that issue has been taken to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled that Congress has authority to control territories and other properties of the United States. However, what has never gone to the Supreme Court is what is other properties of the United States. Now, if you look at your Constitution, you'll see that territory, if it's original, copy, or at least that's a capital T, and that would be a territorial government that's pre-statehood. Okay, so but nowhere ever in the Constitution or any of the Federalist Papers or any of did they declare states land after the state has been enabled as other property of the United States. And I do not believe, and there's tons of evidence to say that this 432 does not include lands inside an enabled state. And history does not include that land inside an enabled state in the Union is other properties of the United States. And the way that the federal government took this land, got control of this land in the western United States, also proves that it is not other properties of the United States. And so
But
that argument has never.
how would you define that property? Because I mean, any property that is under the jurisdiction of the United States, whether it's a state, county, or an actual territory, that is American territory. That's how that's defined. And so
See, now you're show. No, territory, capital T. You understand that Idaho was a territory before it became a state, right?
Yep, absolutely.
And that was a capital T territory. And territories were under the jurisdiction of Congress. But as soon as they become a state, then no longer are they under the jurisdiction and authority of Congress. It changes. Now everything changes at that point. Now you become an independent state, and you're part of the Union with the full rights afforded by the United States Constitution as a state. And everything changes at that point. We're United States. We're states that are united. And what unites us? The Constitution. But prior to that, you weren't a state. You were a territory. And therefore, you were under the jurisdiction and control of Congress, U.S. Congress. And that's well established law. There's no even arguing that point. So the only argument that people would have is, well, what does other properties mean? Well, and other properties also has definitions. And it never was property inside a state that was enabled into the Union, the United States. And that's what I'm saying. And so the argument that needs to be taken to the Supreme Court, and needs to be taken by the state, which is one of the things I intend to do, is for the Supreme Court to define what other properties are. And we are certain that they will not, that these lands cannot be categorized as other properties.
So who would own those lands? I guess is the question. Is the goal to have the states own those lands?
So the state would own it, but I would push for the counties to administer it. There would be certain uh, there would be certain legislation and statutes that would make it so the county can't sell it, make it so that the right to hunt, fish, and all of that are protected on it, and access is protected on it. But that also other rights, such as grazing, logging, and so forth, can be used and managed upon those lands as well as multiple use. But rightfully so, it should be the county administering those lands under the guidance of the legislature,
But that would take
the state legislature.
that would take it so you would have to change the actual Idaho state constitution, because the constitution of the state of Idaho specifically says that state-owned land has to produce revenue for things like school districts and emergency response kind of institutions. And the only way they could really generate revenue off of those is by selling them to people like the Wilkes brothers. And that's where I get worried, Ammon, is like I look at
that. So that's incorrect. You're incorrect. I'm going to call you on that.
On the constitutional clause?
The Constitution does not say that. It does protect the right to hunt and the right for trapping, and it does protect that right, and we need to protect that right. But that's not fully accurate what you're saying. There are some statutorial things when it comes to state land. But those are statutorial. Those can be adjusted and changed by the legislature.
Mm-hmm.
And all of this should be done by the legislature. And I intend to use and help the legislature to go down this path. And that way we're going to protect the right to hunt, the right to fish, camp, and also protect it from being sold to anybody.
Because that's where I have a super hard time with this, and I appreciate your insight on this. I'm trying to find of course my internet's not working great. It's probably because we're Zoom recording right now, but I'll track that down, because it was very specific about the necessity and the requirement for that land to generate, and that, like, so what I guess I look at in something like that,
but not to be sold, and it's statutory, but not to be sold.
But how would it generate revenue without being sold?
Well, you can lease grazing on it. You can lease the land. You can So you understand that every 10th parcel of Idaho is state land, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and most of those lands are not sold, and the reason why they did that to fund mostly education from public schools, and they made every 10th parcel a state land, and that way they can lease it to ranchers, they can lease it to and generate. They could sell mineral rights on it. They can lease it to hunting outfits. They do whatever they want to. They can do to it to generate revenue. I mean, that's how we generate revenue.
Okay, that's a perfect point, actually. I'm glad you brought that up, because the way that you described that, man, I like having somebody that challenges me like this, Ammon. This is good stuff. The way that you described that, what comes to mind instantly is like Texas, and in Texas, there's only 1.777% of publicly accessible land. The rest of it, for the common blue collar guy that wants to go hunt deer, he can't just go up into the hills and hunt, right? He's got to buy a lease, or he's got to know somebody with land, or he's got to win the lottery and buy his own land, or he's got to buy an out of state over the counter tag somewhere like Colorado or Idaho. And I don't ever want to be in the predicament of where we are, like my friends in Texas are. And I also don't ever want to have to ask the king to access his land to hunt on the king's land and shoot the king's deer. And because that's what it's like in Europe and in Idaho and the rest of the American West, we have this beautiful system where we can get tags for $30 at Walmart, drive an hour from town, and be on our land. Yes, it is managed by the federal government, but it's our land, and we can access it whenever we want. And I think that people like me get nervous about that changing, and promises being made that, well, maybe the state should own it. And we never have the conversation of, well, as it is right now, the state, like, what was it? The state of Idaho just got a big chunk of money for pilt money, and we would lose that. And that is one way that this land is generating revenue currently. And I don't think it's $35.8 million of pilt money just to the state of Idaho for our federally managed lands. We would lose that. And I don't think like the Wilkes brothers from Texas coming in here and buying up that land is going to make up for that annual revenue that is lost, because then it's switching that process of what we were just talking about. Like when you buy your property and you're only going to pay once when you first buy it, which I love that idea. But I have I won't get on board with state-owned land. It's like a deal breaker for me. And so I'm trying to.
Let me respond, because you've been going on. I haven't interrupted you.
Sorry,
because that's not an accurate comparison. You're comparing private property to what I am proposing, and that is not an accurate comparison at all.
So are you talking about the Texas comparison or the European comparison?
Both. They're both inaccurate. Because right now, what happens when the federal government, and they will do that? I need to emphasize on your Texas comparison, but what happens when it comes to your European comparison? What happens? Who's the king? It's their federal government. That's who claims all the land. That's what will happen here. Is your European comparison is exactly right. That's what will happen here. What happens when the federal government says, well, we don't care if the state administrates the land, the wildlife. It's our property, and you're not going to hunt there. What happens when they do that? Then is it time now to get the land back into the rightful hands of the people of Idaho?
I guess my answer to that, Ammon, is it's never happened from the federal government, where it has happened from the state. I'm in the crazy predicament of defending the federal government. I don't want you to misconstrue me.
Have you ever heard of wildlife areas, ACECs? I mean, all of these
sure. I agree.
To say that
I would agree with that
point is just not accurate. They're doing it all the time. And these national monuments, they're expanding the limitation of hunting and hiking and fishing and camping. There's even areas where they won't let you walk on it.
Yeah,
and
I know.
This is expanding, and it's an environmentalist movement, and it's coming from the federal government. And there's no way to stop it unless we get these lands into our hands, where the local people get to make the decisions. Now, so that's one part. Then the other part is your analogy with the Texas, and just so you know, I'm wanting to convince you that there's a better way, right?
Yeah, so no, and
no way.
I want you to know I am open to listening. I totally. I don't want you to think that we're in some big argument here. We're just having a discussion. So
yes.
I feel like I'm never going to convince you of my philosophy, and you're never going to convince me of mine. But if we're having this discussion, there's the benefit is to the listeners, so that they can make their decision, right? So
well, and I don't think we're, like we said in the beginning, like I don't think we're way apart from each other, right? I think we might have different opinions about like the way it should be, but
yeah. I agree.
What I mean by that is you want to be able to use and benefit from the land and the wildlife. Mm-hmm. And I want to be able to use and benefit from the land and the wildlife. And I want to make sure that for generations, we're able to use and benefit from the land and the natural resources and the wildlife. And so you're saying that the best way to do that is keep it in the federal hands. And I'm saying that's absolutely not true. It's dangerous. We've got to get it out of their hands. They're completely controlled by environmentalists, and their agenda will put us into where we can't use our lands. We can't hunt and fish and hike. We can't benefit from the natural resources. and our children won't be able to do it, and our children's children won't. And that's what I'm saying. And I believe that because I lived that. My family lived that. And
Mm-hmm.
I've seen thousands of other people that have also lived that. And then I see what's happening to Idaho. And I'm just like, we have to fight this battle and get this and make sure that the state, laws are set forth correctly, that because I have no intention of wanting to take these 33 million acres of federally controlled land in Idaho and turn it all into private property and
See
then
that
allow.
there you that's exactly what I was concerned about because that's what I've been told. And so that's what I want you to clarify. You just made a great point. Because when I hear here's what happens, Ammon. When you're in like my position, I've got a hunting podcast. We advocate for public
Right.
land access. We advocate for hunting rights. This is what we do. So when I hear somebody talking about how the state's going to take over the land, and I'm aware of what the state currently does with its own land, and how that is used to generate profits for school districts and EMS and things of that nature, I get concerned that your goal is to take that federally managed land that we currently enjoy now. All of us blue collar hunters that don't have millions of dollars to buy our own hunting property, but hunting is our life, man. I mean, hunting is our
Sure.
life. This isn't like we're not collecting bottle caps here. That hunting
Right.
is what we do. And so when I hear somebody say that, I instantly think, okay, so the Wilkes brothers are going to take over my hunting spot and put a gate on the road, and my days of elk hunting in the backcountry during September are over. That's what I think of, and I think that's what a lot of people think about. What is your response?
So one is nobody is selling more land or doing land trades by trading public lands into private. Nobody's doing that more than the federal government in Idaho. Just let's get that clear. They are doing that. They're doing land transfers all the time. And yeah, you might say, "Oh, well, it's a land transfer." Yeah, they transfer some beautiful area that has tons of wildlife because some of their buddies want it for something that is out in the middle of, the sagebrush, which I know sometimes can be good hunting too, but they transfer that land all the time and they also sell it. So there is that. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
and that's a, established fact that's what they're doing. They're also closing roads constantly and closing access constantly. So it's not like what we have now is, this really great thing. But what I'm proposing that we take and reestablish these public lands for multiple use. And you might say, well, that's scary. Well, is it really that scary? Because what roads do the hunters use? I mean, you know this. What roads do you use? Who made those roads?
Forest Service or whoever logging it.
Wrong. It
It
was not the
depends.
Forest Service.
Well, it depends on what part of the state you're in. Most of my
Yeah,
roads are
but
made by
it is
logging.
they made by logging. That's correct.
Yep.
So the loggers were logging it. They were in there and they should log it responsibly, but they make roads, they create access. And right along with that, people were hunting, they were camping, hiking, enjoying that. And the loggers were logging and you wave hi to them when you go by them. And we can all work together. It's called multiple use. Ranchers were ranching, and they had water tanks and bringing wildlife in. People were hunting around the water tanks, improving, the hunting and the wildlife population, and and everybody's fine with it. The ranchers fine with it. The hunters think it's great. The ranchers think it's fine. Sometimes they don't like it because uh, a hunter will decide, or someone, not really a hunter, because I think true hunters wouldn't do this, but someone decides that they want to put a hole in the a water tank, and
Yeah.
but what I'm saying is that we have this multiple use balance that worked for the first 100 years of most of our states, and that's what I believe that these lands should go back to and administered by the local people, protected by the state, administered by the local people, so that we protect and so that we're using our forests, they're being grazed so they don't, burn up, so that we're also producing wealth and income. But they have to be multiple use. They have to be always available to protect the rights of the hunter, the fisher, the hiker, the camper. They have to be, and it's called multiple use, and it works. It works in the West because
Yeah.
the West is so arid. It works in the West.
It's interesting how perceptions can be so different when we're on this. You and I think that we're like on the same page on a lot of things, but we have like these perceptions that vary pretty widely. Like you had just mentioned, that what we have now is not that great, and I would totally disagree with that. I absolutely, because in my neck of the woods, and maybe it's different down like near Emmett, where you're out of, but I mean, where I'm at, I cross the highway. I'm in one of the biggest national forests in the country. It's filled with elk. It's filled with bears. It's filled with wolves. It's filled with deer. There's logging operations going on. There's people go in there and they're camping, they're hunting, they're fishing, they're harvesting mushrooms and huckleberries and all these things that are taking place that is multi-use. And that's the goal, and we agree on that. This land is supposed to be for multi-use. I'm not saying it's just for hunters. What I'm saying is the threat of some oil tycoon coming in and buying this land and making it inaccessible to both scientists trying to manage wildlife and hunters like you and I trying to access it, or ranchers that want to graze their cattle, or logging operations that need to get the that timber out of there for forest management. That's where it would become a problem, and that's where it would become detrimental. So I think that it's good that we talked on this topic, because I was, and I think that there's a lot of people that listen to this show that were under the impression that your thought was you wanted to like have these public auctions on federally managed lands to generate revenue for the state, kind of thing. And that's what happens when we have a media that doesn't report or is not honest about what they're talking about, or what the facts are on the ground, right? I mean, we all know that media bias.
Well,
But go ahead.
To fair to that statement and needing to bring this up, I have proposed that around some of these towns, rather than building on our agricultural land or becoming densely populated states, that around some of these towns, we need to be able to spread out a little bit. And I have expressed that, but I've been very, very explicit that it is around these towns and these cities, but that the 33 million acres, because we got just shy of 33 million acres of federally controlled land, that the bulk of it, the majority by far, like 32 million acres of it, needs to be preserved. And the reason for that is you talked about, because there's several things going on because of the federal land control. One is Idaho can't pay its own bills, and so that's an issue. We have to go to the federal government. Two, we have a affordable housing crisis because we're landlocked.
Yeah.
Three, we're building our houses on our agricultural land, and that's we're destroying our number one industry, like I mentioned, and then
I agree.
And I mean, it's because we're landlocked,
Yep.
And we're building on land that we can never get back from agriculture. When right around these towns, and I'm looking at it right here in Emmett, right? Like literally, we could build a house or housing development right around on the edge of these towns, never threaten any type of hunting or fishing or hiking or anything, but then also preserve our agricultural land and make it so that housing for the next generation is affordable. So, to be fair to at least to the statement that I want to use some of these lands for around the towns for development, I think that that is a fair statement, but it's absolutely 100% inaccurate if anybody is saying that I want to take our forests and our hunting and our hiking and all this land that we have and turn it into private property. That's just absolutely inaccurate.
Sure. Okay. Well, I'm glad you clarified that because again, I think that a lot of people were under that impression, and I know I'm keeping you past an hour here, Ammon. We'll kind of wrap this up. I guess what it boils down to from my end is I the one of the biggest reasons I started this show is because I'm passionate about the very unique thing that we enjoy in the United States, which is the freedom to go into these lands and pursue our passions. And that's a very unique thing right here in the United States and Canada. It all ties into the model of wildlife conservation, the North American model of wildlife conservation, and it protects things against like some of the institutions in Texas, like where it almost becomes this market hunting thing and a thing that only rich people can enjoy. And so that's where I get protective. The blue collar guy, the guy that's out there banging a hammer, that doesn't have the money to buy thousands of acres to hunt elk on. And that's
I,
who I'm trying to look out for. And I
I,
feel like you've clarified that.
I have one question for you though,
Yeah,
and
go for it.
it might change your listeners' thoughts one way or the other, and I might have to emphasize, but you know the answer to this. It's a rhetorical question just to make a point. Who owns the wildlife in Idaho?
Well, the Idaho, well, and this is the same with any state. The state owns the wildlife and is managed for the citizen, and that's kind of the same thing. That the idea between both are a balanced system. We all own that
Okay,
wildlife.
okay. So, and your whole argument has been that the state, you love hunting and you love what the having access to the wildlife and having access to all these things, and yet you're making my point. The state manages that.
So and I that's a fair point, Ammon. I'm not arguing with that, but the idea behind what we have now is you and I own that land, that federal land. You and I own it, not the federal. There's not somebody sitting in Washington D.C. that has the title. We own it as
Okay, so
citizens. We own it as
well,
citizens. It's managed for the people, just like the wildlife. Nobody has a title to them. This like in England.
okay, so
Um,
who administers the wildlife? Who
the
manages the
state
wildlife in
agencies, Idaho
Idaho?
Fish and Game. Yeah, Idaho Fish and Game.
Okay, so why can't they manage the land? Or why can't the state manage the land?
I
Like
I
you're
think that
saying
that's
you're saying they're doing such a great job at managing the wildlife,
mhm.
which
Idaho does, man. There's people that'll
in
disagree
general,
with
I
me.
think. Well, there are some, but I
Yeah,
mean,
yeah,
it's still accessible and so on and so forth. But yeah, somehow you're saying that we can't manage our own lands.
yeah. And I mean, at that point, we're getting into, obviously, Idaho Fish and Game. They've done a really good job at following the North American model of wildlife conservation and utilizing hunting as a management tool. So every state agency is not equal. Like my friends over in Washington, they wouldn't agree with their state agency like I do with my state agency. So that's all
Yeah,
super state dependent.
that's because their state agencies have been completely infiltrated with these extreme environmentalists,
You wouldn't
and
believe it. Yeah, yeah. The Washington
it's
that.
much easier to root bad eggs out of your government when it's local than when it's national. And that really is, I think, what comes down to my ultimate argument. If this land stays in the hands of the federal government, we will lose access to it. We will. And that I am certain of 100%. And I think that comes down to what you and I both do not want to happen. We want access to our lands. We want to be able to hunt, fish, hike. We want to use and benefit from the lands and the resources and the wildlife.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe that it is in danger under the federal government's control, and mostly because we cannot correct it when this extreme environmentalism continues to go in full force. We cannot correct it. And
Yeah.
so I'll just leave you with that.
Well, before you do that, that was actually that was a good conversation, Am, and I appreciate all that. It was robust. That's what I like. I like getting
Yes,
the blood pumping, right? Um,
absolutely.
I want to give you the opportunity to spend like 1 or 2 minutes just making your case to the Idaho voter, why you feel like you're the guy for the job in Boise and
Okay.
kind of give us your campaign speech, or I don't know, what do you call that in politics? I don't even know what you call that.
I
Elevator
don't know
pitch?
either. Yeah, probably something that
Yeah,
you tune out. Something you tune out, right?
usually, right? Yeah, I'd
Oh,
love to
that's
hear it
awesome.
though.
Well, I think I'll just go through the 8 planks of my Keep Idaho, Idaho plan, and you can draw conclusions and learn a little more from there.
Okay,
Um, and just because it's easy to communicate, won't take too much time, and I think it'll cover mostly of what I'm about, what I'm doing. So number one is to protect private property. Number two is eliminate progressive taxes. Number three is to free Idaho from federal control. Number four is to make Idaho independent again, where we can pay our own bills and be able to act more independently as a state. Number five, bring back the rule of law. There's a lot to that. Number six, make Idaho an economic powerhouse. We have the ability to do that, and we can do that. Number seven, secure the quality of life for every Idahoan family. And number eight, make Idaho an example of peace and prosperity for the rest of the world. I think we can lead in that. I believe that we have the people and the ideals here in Idaho that, and enough people kind of united in that we can do things in the state of Idaho that other states couldn't, and that we should lead in those ways. So
I like
those
that.
are pretty general. Those are pretty general, but I think you can get a picture of what I'm about. And man, I really appreciate the opportunity and the conversation we've had.
No, it's great. I appreciate you coming on and taking some time to argue with a hillbilly like me, and it's good getting to know you. And so, yeah, I really do appreciate it. I think that was a really good conversation. Voters are going to get a lot out of it, and I'm wishing you luck, my friend. This is I need to try to get your commitment while we're still recording, though. Are you ready for
Okay,
this?
I'm ready. I'm ready.
If you win, can I come down to the governor's mansion and give you a Western Huntsman hat and interview you in the governor's mansion?
Well, I don't think we have a governor's mansion anymore. I think they got rid of that.
Did they? Did they
However,
get rid of it?
yeah,
See, I'm out of the loop,
yeah,
man.
yeah, I think they did. I've heard that, but I will commit to the second half of that, and
Sweet.
absolutely give you interview and talk, and I will also commit to something much greater than that. That is protecting the right and the enjoyment of the people of Idaho to hunt, to fish, to hike, to camp, and to access our public lands.
Fantastic. I appreciate that sentiment for sure. Well, okay, sir. I again thank you for coming on. I appreciate you extending past the hour we had slated for this. I hope I didn't get you in trouble with your campaign manager. And
luckily, you're last on my agenda today.
Perfect. Good deal.
Other than my son has a football game that we'll be going to here in a little bit, so it was just great. I think it was well time spent. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you very much. We'll talk soon, and I'm looking forward to it.
All right. Thank you. Have a good day.
You too. You made it all the way to the end. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. We sure appreciate your support. This is Jim Huntsman signing off and reminding you to check us out at Instagram at The Western Huntsman and on Facebook at The Western Huntsman. And you can also check out the website at thewesternhuntsman.com. Thanks again. We'll see you guys next time. Stay Western, and I'll see you on the mountain.